Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are dissecting a question that is, well, it's as much about economic survival as it is about the future of healthcare. Can the Netherlands actually transform itself into the Silicon Valley of MedTech? We're looking at a global market that is just exploding. I mean, it's expected to hit something like 550 billion euros. Yet Europe, and specifically the Netherlands, is at real risk of becoming a museum of great ideas that were commercialized somewhere else.
That's putting it politely. I mean, what we're watching is a slow-motion car crash where Dutch tax money funds brilliant world-class research, and then American venture capital swoops in to reap the rewards. Now we have the Groeiplan MedTech on the table, this massive strategic proposal aiming to place the Netherlands in the global top 3 by 2035. It's ambitious. I'll certainly give it that. But having read through the strategy, I'm seeing a lot of hope doing the heavy lifting where execution should be.
See, I think you're mistaking ambition for naivety. This isn't just some wish list. The Groeiplan is, I'd argue, the first time we've seen a coherent industrial strategy that leverages our very specific Goldilocks situation. The Netherlands is small enough to connect every major player, from the deep tech in Delft to the clinical giants in Rotterdam. But we're also big enough to actually matter on the global stage. We have a sector where the added value per employee is roughly 183,000 euros. That is incredibly high productivity. The plan aims to mobilize over 5 billion euros to finally turn that efficiency into real scale.
Scale is the key word, isn't it? But you can't scale on a fractured foundation. My issue isn't with the science. The science is absolutely world-class. My issue is that we are the undisputed world champions of the Valley of Death. You know the place, that gap where a startup has a working prototype, maybe even a patient trial, but goes bankrupt waiting for Series C funding or just getting strangled by regulation. This plan talks about building ecosystems, but I see a landscape paralyzed by the European Medical Device Regulation, the MDR, and a university system that still treats intellectual property like a fortress to be defended, not a resource to be shared.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because I think you are clinging to a historical view of the Dutch landscape that this plan is specifically designed to dismantle. You mentioned fragmentation. The Groeiplan attacks that head-on with the concept of flagships. And these aren't just pilot projects. They are infrastructure builders designed to force collaboration. Take Flagship 1, the regional command centers. This is a direct response to the labor shortage. It forces hospitals to stop operating as little islands and adopt a national standard for data sharing and remote monitoring. You simply can't have a command center if the hospital in Rotterdam can't talk to the hospital in Utrecht.
Forcing hospitals to cooperate is a lovely concept, but have you ever tried to get 2 department heads in the same hospital to agree on a brand of coffee, let alone a data standard? But look, my concern with the flagships is deeper than just coordination. Look at Flagship 3, the autonomous MRI. The goal is using AI to make scanning faster, cheaper. Sounds fantastic. But by betting the farm on these 3 massive top-down consortiums, are we starving the outliers?
What do you mean by starving?
I mean, that innovation in MedTech is, well, it's rarely linear and it rarely comes from a committee. Just look at the map. Excellence isn't just in the big hardware hubs. I mean, look at Maastricht UMC+. They're doing world-leading work in regenerative medicine and smart materials at the Merlin Institute. Or look at Radboud UMC in Nijmegen, which is pioneering digital health and Parkinson's monitoring. These don't fit neatly into an autonomous MRI box. If we funnel the lion's share of that 5 billion euros into 3 giant flagships, are we accidentally killing the very diversity that actually produces the next unicorn? We might be building a really, really nice MRI machine while the rest of the world moves on to 3D bioprinting.
That's a valid fear, but only if you view the flagships as closed loops, and the strategy explicitly defines them as open platforms. That is the ecosystem handshake. If we build the autonomous MRI infrastructure, we aren't just building a magnet. We are building the AI validation protocols, the cloud architecture, and the privacy frameworks. A startup in Maastricht working on regenerative medicine still needs those same validation protocols and data highways. The flagship does the heavy lifting on the boring stuff, the infrastructure, so the niche innovators in Nijmegen or Groningen can just plug in. It raises the water level for everyone, not just for Philips.
That handshake metaphor is doing a lot of work there. In my experience, the handshake between academia and industry often feels more like a shakedown. And this brings us right back to the valley of death. You can have the best data infrastructure in the world, but if a researcher at a Dutch university wants to spin out a company, the Technology Transfer Office, the TTO, often demands such a high equity stake or such complex royalty terms that the company is basically uninvestable before it even registers at the Chamber of Commerce. Investors look at the cap table, see the university owns a controlling stake with zero risk, and they just walk away.
That was the reality 5 years ago. I'll grant you that. But the landscape is shifting, and this plan is meant to accelerate that shift. The Groy plan leans heavily on the new National IP Deal Term principles. It's a standardization of the rules, capping royalties, creating transparent equity deals. The goal is to stop treating every patent negotiation like it's some unique hostage situation. Plus, look at the financial commitment. There is a specific proposal for a €50 million thematic technology transfer program. This is cash specifically earmarked to grease the wheels of that spin-off phase.
50 million in a 550 billion euro market? That's a rounding error. That barely covers the legal fees for the patents. And even if it helps them start, it doesn't solve the Series C crunch. The Netherlands is fine at seed funding, giving you $200K to start in a garage. But where is the 20 million to scale? That capital exists in Boston. It exists in Minnesota. It essentially does not exist here. So what happens? The companies take the U.S. money, and inevitably the HQ moves to the U.S. The Groy plan proposes a national MedTech fund with InvestNL, but is public money really agile enough to pick winners in a sector this complex?
But it's not about the government picking winners. It's about the government de-risking the sector so private money feels safe enough to follow. InvestNL signals to the market that the state backs this technology. But I think you're missing the other side of the coin. Money follows opportunity. If we can prove that the Netherlands is the fastest place to validate a clinical device, the money will stay.
Fastest place to validate.
Okay.
Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the European Medical Device Regulation, the MDR.
I knew we'd get here.
We have to. It's the single biggest choke point. Since the MDR was implemented, certification costs have quadrupled. We are talking 400,000 to 800,000 euros just to keep an existing product on the market. Timelines for approval are stretching to 18-24 months. I talk to founders every single week who are skipping Europe entirely. They launch in the US first because the FDA, while strict, is at least predictable. The Groy plan says it hopes for better EU legislation. Hope is not a strategy. The Netherlands cannot unilaterally fix Brussels.
We can't fix Brussels, no, but we can hack the process. The strategy here isn't to change the EU law, it's to create regulatory sandboxes right here within the Netherlands. The plan proposes utilizing the urgent clinical need designation. Basically, we create fast lanes within the Dutch system. If a startup is part of a flagship, say testing that new MRI AI, they get access to a national test center that handles the heavy lifting of data governance and clinical evidence generation. So instead of every startup fighting the notified bodies alone, they do it with the weight of the national infrastructure behind them.
A sandbox is nice for playing, but eventually you have to sell in the real world. A Dutch urgent need stamp doesn't let you sell in Germany or France. You still need the CE mark. And right now, the notified bodies, the agencies that give out those stamps, are understaffed and overwhelmed. A Dutch test center doesn't change the fact that the queue for the stamp is 2 years long. We are building a Ferrari engine, our R&D, and putting it in a car with square wheels. That's the EU regulatory market.
True. But think about the velocity of evidence. If you can generate high-quality, real-world clinical evidence twice as fast because you're in a Dutch testbed with direct hospital access, your application for that CE mark is stronger and it gets approved faster than your competitor who is struggling to set up a trial in some fragmented system. It's all about relative speed, and to achieve that velocity, we need alignment. This brings us to the governance structure, which I think is really the unsung hero of this plan.
The National MedTech Board? I'm skeptical.
Since when does adding a board reduce bureaucracy?
It's not about adding bureaucracy. It's about breaking silos. Right now, you have the Ministry of Economic Affairs pushing for innovation, and the Ministry of Health pushing for cost containment. They are pulling in opposite directions. The National MedTech Board brings them, along with industry and hospitals, to one table. Its mandate is to stop the gold plating, that classic Dutch habit of taking a strict EU rule and adding 5 extra national rules on top just to be safe.
I'll believe the end of gold plating when I see it. But the biggest hurdle for that board isn't the government. It's the customers, the hospitals themselves. The concept of the launching customer is vital here. Startups go to the U.S. because American hospitals buy innovation. They have budgets for it. Dutch hospitals, they hesitate. They wait for validation. They say, show me it works in Boston first. Can a national board really tell the UMC in Utrecht or the hospital in Rotterdam to change its procurement strategy?
They have to, and not because the board says so, but because the labor market says so. This is the forcing function. We are short thousands of nurses and technicians. The GROI plan estimates technology can free up 110,000 full-time equivalents. That is the only way the healthcare system doesn't collapse under the weight of an aging population. The hospitals, the UMCs, they were co-authors of this plan. This isn't just industry lobbying. This is the hospitals themselves saying, we need these tools to survive.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You're asking for a massive behavior change from doctors and specialists who are used to doing things a certain way. I mean, implementing an autonomous workflow implies changing how a radiologist works, how a nurse monitors a patient. Resistance will be high. And while we're busy fighting that internal culture war, let's look at the physical reality. The plan talks about strategic autonomy in manufacturing. But can we really make things here? Energy costs are skyrocketing. We have net congesti. The power grid is full. Companies can't even get a new connection. Is the whole idea of Dutch manufacturing just a nostalgic dream?
If we were trying to mass-produce latex gloves or standard syringes, yes, it would absolutely be a dream. We'd lose to Asia instantly. But we aren't competing on commodities. We're competing on high-complexity, low-volume systems, the machines that build the machines. We have companies like VDL and ProDrive here. The ecosystem of precision suppliers, that legacy of ASML and Philips, is unique in the world. The GROI plan reinforces this by focusing on smart manufacturing, robotics, AI integration. We keep the high-value production close to the R&D, that feedback loop where the engineer can walk to the factory floor to tweak the sensor. That's how you iterate faster than China or the US.
I will grant you the high-tech manufacturing streams. It's real, but I worry about the focus. The plan puts so much emphasis on this top sector policy, but look at the actual texture of the industry. It's highly fragmented. You have these clusters, Medical Delta in the west, Brainport in the south, the Health Hub in the north. And historically, they compete. They fight for the same grants. You suggest the board will unify them. But typically, when you try to centralize decentralized excellence, you just create a new layer of middle management. Why not just give the money directly to the labs and the startups and get out of the way?
Because getting out of the way has given us the current situation, excellent islands that don't scale. The Valley of Death exists precisely because there is no bridge between the lab and the market. The board and the flagships are that bridge. And it's not just about money, it's about data. The European Health Data Space, the EHDS, is coming. The plan argues that the Netherlands should be the first to fully implement it. If we create a trusted, national infrastructure where health data can be used for research without violating privacy, we become the most attractive place in Europe for AI development.
That is a massive if. The public trust component is huge. If we push too fast on data availability for the sake of industrial policy, we risk a privacy backlash that shuts the whole thing down. And honestly, the technical implementation of a national health data lake, we've been trying to digitize patient records for 20 years. It's still a mess. I struggle to see how a GROI plan fixes decades of IT debt.
It fixes it by narrowing the scope. We aren't trying to fix all IT everywhere at once. We're starting with the flagships. Fix the data flow for the command centers. Fix the data flow for the MRI. Prove it works, prove it's safe, and then you expand. It's a wedge strategy.
I suppose my skepticism comes down to the timeline. This plan targets 2035. That's more than 10 years away. In tech, that is a century. While we're setting up boards and flagships, the AI revolution is happening now. The companies in San Francisco aren't waiting for a Dutch national board to approve a sandbox. They are deploying. I just worry we're building battleships, these massive, heavy flagship projects, when the market demands speedboats.
I understand the caution, but I believe the GROI plan is the shipyard that allows those speedboats to launch. Look, for the first time, the universities, the industry, and the government aren't fighting each other. They have signed the same document. The focus on flagships creates the gravity to attract the capital. The national data infrastructure creates the rails. If we execute this, the flywheel effect kicks in. The Netherlands becomes the logical heart of European MedTech, not despite the regulations, but because we are the only ones organized enough to handle them efficiently.
I see the potential. I do. But the execution needs to be flawless. We need to solve the Series C funding gap, not with 50 million, but with billions. We need to cut the TTO red tape immediately, not in 5 years. And we need hospitals to actually buy the stuff we invent.
On the stakes, we certainly agree. It's about the economic survival of a key sector and ultimately the affordability of our own healthcare. If we don't do this, we will be buying our own inventions back from American companies at triple the price in 10 years' time.
That is a sobering thought. Let's hope the GROI plan is more than just paper.
Indeed, it's a debate that will define the next decade for the Netherlands. Thank you for listening to The Debate.